6 lives were lost in seconds. At 6:54 a.m. on Sunday, June 29, 2025, a Cessna 441 Conquest II departed runway 32 at Ohio's Youngstown Warren Regional Airport under clear skies, light winds, and ideal conditions for flight. Bound for Montana, the aircraft barely gained altitude before crashing just 2 kilometers from the runway, tearing through trees and erupting in flames behind 3 homes. No distress call, no obvious mechanical failure. On board were 2 experienced pilots, Joseph Maxin, 63, and Timothy Blake, 55, and 4 members of the Weller family, Veronica, 68, James II, 67, John, 36, and Maria, 34. All perished. For investigators and the aviation community alike, one question immediately stood out. How does a well-equipped twin turboprop simply fall from the sky on a perfect morning? Let's take a look. The timeline begins at approximately 6:54 a.m. local time on Sunday, June 29, 2025. The aircraft, a 1984 Cessna 441 Conquest II, tail number November 441 Lima Sierra, operated by Meander Air LLC, began its takeoff roll on runway 32 at Youngstown Warren Regional Airport in northeastern Ohio. The mission was a nonstop cross-country flight to Bozeman-Yellowstone International Airport in Montana. With 6 people on board and clear weather, it was supposed to be a smooth departure. But that didn't happen. Instead, ADS-B tracking data shows the aircraft reaching only about 110 knots of ground speed, even after covering nearly 7,000 feet of runway. That's extremely sluggish acceleration for a Conquest, and it became clear something was wrong almost immediately. The aircraft climbed to only 1,100 feet MSL, virtually the same as the airport's field elevation, and failed to establish any meaningful climb rate. Data shows a fluctuation of just about 64 feet per minute, essentially flat flight. The aircraft drifted slightly left, of course, and then the data abruptly stops. No emergency transmission was recorded. No mayday, just silence. At approximately 7 a.m., November 4th, 441, Lima Sierra impacted a wooded area near King Graves Road and Hen Hide Road just west of the airport. Witnesses on the ground heard a loud, thunder-like noise, followed by the sight of heavy smoke and flames erupting from the trees, terrifyingly close to nearby homes. Miraculously, no one on the ground was hurt, but the aircraft came down just behind 3 residential structures, missing them by what can only be described as sheer luck. Emergency responders faced tough terrain. The wreckage burned intensely, hidden deep in dense woods and brush. Fire crews had difficulty accessing the site, and by the time they reached the fuselage, there was little to be done. All 6 occupants had perished in the impact and fire. The final moments were brief, violent, and left no chance for survival. At this point, there are no indications that weather played any role in the accident. The conditions were calm and clear, with light winds 19 degrees Celsius and no visibility restrictions. The runway is 9,000 feet long, sitting at just 1,152 feet elevation, more than enough space for a Conquest to safely take off even under full weight. Density altitude was not a factor. In short, we have an aircraft that was supposed to perform flawlessly in near-perfect conditions with experienced pilots at the controls, and yet, in the space of 30 seconds, it never really got off the ground. When an aircraft crashes seconds after takeoff with no distress call, no weather interference, and no warning signs, the list of potential causes is short, but serious. One of the leading theories in this case is a failure of one of the Conquest's 2 Garrett TPE 331 turboprop engines. If one engine quit right after rotation, the pilots would have faced a sudden and violent asymmetry in thrust. The Conquest II can fly on a single engine, but only if the inoperative engine's propeller is feathered immediately to reduce drag. If the prop windmills instead, drag increases dramatically, often to catastrophic levels. And in this aircraft, that feathering step isn't automatic. It requires deliberate action via the emergency shutoff lever. If there was even a brief delay in identifying the failure or moving the condition lever, the aircraft's climb capability would have dropped to near zero. But configuration could have played a role too. In any engine-out situation, getting the landing gear up and the flaps retracted quickly is non-negotiable. At high gross weight, likely the case here, with 6 people and full fuel for a long-haul trip, any extra drag becomes a performance killer. The Conquest one-engine climb rate under perfect configuration is only about 700 feet per minute. Leave the gear down or flaps out and that number collapses. Investigators will be focused heavily on the aircraft's configuration at impact. Was the gear still extended? Were the flaps left in the takeoff position? If so, that alone could have been enough to prevent a safe climb out, even with one engine still running. Then there's the human factor. This was a high workload moment. If an engine failure occurred just after liftoff, the pilots had seconds to identify the issue, feather the prop, clean up the aircraft, and fly a precise profile to maintain altitude. The checklist is short: identify, verify, feather, secure, but it demands flawless execution. Even highly experienced crews can fall behind the aircraft when everything happens that fast. Task saturation at low altitude is one of the most unforgiving situations in aviation. A moment of confusion, hesitation, or disagreement between pilots can easily be the tipping point between survival and disaster. Mechanical irregularities can't be ruled out either. The Garrett TPE 331 is a tough engine, but it has a few quirks. Power lever creep, fuel control issues, or torque limiter faults have caused serious problems in other incidents. If one engine started producing less thrust or responding sluggishly during the takeoff roll, the aircraft might have appeared controllable at first, until rotation revealed a deeper issue. And here's what's really puzzling. By the time the aircraft had traveled 7,000 feet down the runway, its ground speed was only around 110 knots. That's unusually low. It suggests something was holding the aircraft back even before it left the ground. Could it have been brake drag? Improper engine spool up? A misreading of performance cues? If so, why didn't the crew reject the takeoff when the aircraft clearly wasn't accelerating as expected? In a sense, that might be the most haunting part of this crash. Not just the failure itself, but the possibility that it was subtle, almost invisible, until it was far too late to fix. Whether it was engine failure, configuration missteps, crew overload, or an undetected fault, the result was the same. The aircraft never reached a safe speed, never achieved a climb, and never got the chance to recover. The Cessna 441 Conquest II is a high-performance twin turboprop built for range and speed, often used in corporate and charter operations. With cruise speeds near 300 knots and a maximum takeoff weight over 10,000 pounds, it has the power and capability for demanding missions. But with that performance comes a tight margin for error, especially in engine-out scenarios. At full gross weight, the aircraft's single-engine climb rate under ideal conditions is around 700 feet per minute. That's assuming the aircraft is properly configured, gear up, flaps retracted, and the failed engine's propeller fully feathered. In this design, feathering isn't automatic. The pilot must move the condition lever to emergency shutoff. If that step is missed or delayed, and the propeller windmills, drag increases dramatically, and performance can collapse. The engines are known for their reliability and fast throttle response due to their direct drive design, but they're also sensitive to torque and fuel control issues. The aircraft includes a negative torque sensing, or NTS, system to help increase blade pitch if an engine fails, but it doesn't fully feather the prop. It only assists. If the crew expected NTS to handle feathering or overlooked the manual step in those critical seconds, the drag penalty would have made a safe climb virtually impossible. The Conquest doesn't offer automation or protection systems seen in modern jets. Everything, from feathering to configuration cleanup, depends entirely on pilot action. It's a pilot's airplane, but also one that demands memorized procedures and split-second decision-making in the event of failure. The NTSB will start by determining whether both engines were producing power at impact, and if one wasn't, whether its propeller was feathered. That alone will reveal whether the crew recognized and responded to an engine failure. Investigators will also assess if the gear and flaps were retracted, since any excess drag could explain the failed climb. A full teardown of the engines, fuel control units, and propeller systems will follow. Issues like power lever creep or torque imbalances have caused problems in past Conquest incidents. Investigators will also study maintenance records for unresolved faults or overdue inspections, and pilot records for recent training, type currency, and familiarity with emergency procedures. Additional angles will include a review of the airport environment, weather data, and potential external factors like wildlife or runway contamination. Meanwhile, security camera footage from homes and businesses may help verify the flight profile and configuration in the final seconds. We can expect a preliminary report by late July, likely confirming basic facts, engine status, configuration, and impact data. The final report may take over a year, but the central questions are already clear. Did the aircraft suffer a sudden failure, or was this a case of small delays and missed cues compounding into catastrophe? This wasn't a marginal day. The weather was good, the runway was long, and the aircraft was capable. What failed and how quickly will be the story that matters most, not just for closure, but for what it teaches everyone who flies aircraft like this.